All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for being here. I really appreciate you coming on the show. So thanks for reaching out and deciding that you wanted to be here with us.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
absolutely. So let me just go down just a few details.
Okay.
My producer, Matt, will come on the show about 2 or 3 minutes before we go live. And he will do a sound check and make sure that you sound good, make sure I sound good. And in the chat, he will put in 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 30 seconds. That's just the countdown before we go to break.
Okay.
Around the 2-minute mark, excuse me, around the 2-minute mark, I will wrap it up with you. I'll ask you to give your contact information, and then I'm going to do my little spiel, and then we'll go to break. It's about a 2-minute break. We come back, I'll reintroduce you, and then we'll do the show. And then at the tail end, we'll do the same thing again. Around the 2-minute mark, we'll wrap it up. You can give your contact information, and we go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So I like to keep things very casual. So one of the reasons I really like doing this through Zoom, and I don't do it in the studio, I don't do it via phone. I like to do it via Zoom because I can see you.
Yeah.
When people are in the studio, they get a little intimidated with all the lights going on. And it's a little bit more real.
Yeah.
Zoom just feels, we're so conditioned to like Zoom that it seems like just a natural conversation. So it doesn't feel like you're projecting your conversation over the entire world, which is really what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we do have people that listen to us all over the world, in China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Russia, Europe, New Zealand, Australia. So we do get quite a big reach.
Good.
So it's kind of fun. I would like you to, you have the full hour. So when we talk, feel free to talk as much as you want.
Okay.
Just make sure that you pay attention to, when we get to the tail end, and make sure that I have at least a minute at the tail end to do my thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions before we get started?
No, I mean, I'm totally open for, just throwing in questions to move the conversation along, and,
All right.
things as well.
I love it.
I left my notebook over here.
Okay, go ahead. So if you have to cough, sneeze, or anything like that, make sure you hit the mute button. If you do have papers on your desk, make sure you're aware of how much you're shuffling them. Okay. I tried to keep my papers and my microphone a little bit away from each other, just so that they don't make that noise. Like, I just put my pen down, you could hear it very easily. So just be aware that the microphone does pick up everything. So when we start, I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to read your bio. And then I want to start off with just tell us a little bit about you. So even though in the bio, I kind of give a brief description of your background, I want you to, if you're comfortable, elaborate a little bit more on that. Talk a little bit about some of your life experiences and what brought you to where you're at today.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about your challenges. And then we'll go through the questions that you gave me in there. What are some of your greatest successes? Right after that, I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
Okay. I want you to talk to me a little bit about, what inspired you to write your book, and when it's coming out. So just any information you'd like to give us about that.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then we'll go through, I added a few questions as well. Like, and I tell you these things because I personally am not a fan of surprises. I like to know how my conversations are going to go, especially if they're public.
Yep.
Okay, so the questions that I have is, how do you inspire others? What's the number one piece of advice that you would give somebody else? Because you're successful, and most people want to know, how did you become successful, right? What did you do differently? What advice would you give your 20-year-old self? That's usually the last question I ask.
Oh, That's a pretty loaded question for me.
I know. That's why I tell you up front. If we get into in there, and I might have other questions along the way.
Mhm.
If it's something you're absolutely not comfortable with, I thought it was funny that you wrote in there, I won't talk about politics. I don't touch politics and I don't touch religion,
Yeah.
because those are very personal things. And
Mhm.
it is just, in my opinion, not appropriate for my show.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't touch it anyway. And believe it or not, I have done a show on a woman who came and talked about her political views, but it was
Mhm.
just her political views. It wasn't like
Yeah.
an exchange. So I wouldn't touch those anyway, just so that you're clear, that
Yeah.
I'm not going to blindside you with anything. But if
No.
I do ask you a question that you're not ready to answer, you can always just say, hey, that's for another show, or, I'm just, what I would really like to talk about is this.
Yeah.
And then just change the subject. I'm fine with that.
Okay. I will let you know, the book that I wrote is a faith-based book, but I'm not going to go off on any tangents where that's concerned. So,
yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with your perspective. I'm just going to say there's not going to be any exchange on it. Like, I'm not going to inject, well, why do you believe that? Or no, we're not going to go there. You can share your opinion, you can share your thoughts, and that's totally fine. The whole point of my show is to help people who are listening to be inspired and help them better their lives. And I'm well aware of the politics and religion are intertwined in our everyday life. I'm not blind to that. But it's not really what the show is all about. So yeah. But yeah, I think it'll be good. And like I said, if there's anything you're not comfortable with, just say, hey, that's for another show, or what, I really just want to talk about this, and we'll move on. I'm really, and one of the reasons I like to do this face-to-face is I'm really good at reading faces. So if I see you're uncomfortable in any way, we'll just move on to something else. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Any other questions, or any questions at all before we get going?
Is my lighting okay?
Your lighting's fine. Yeah, your lighting looks fine. Matt will let you know if the audio's good. I don't change anything on my audio yet. He still checks it every single time. Because one week I dropped my microphone and it did change things. So I got a little dent somewhere here.
Oh no.
Yeah, it happens. So yeah, I was like, oh, here it is. I was like, well, it's just par for the course. You're gonna bang up things at some point, right?
Yep.
So yeah. So which part of Texas do you live in?
I live north of Dallas.
Okay. Yeah, it's a big state. My one of my friends, well, actually my associate editor, lives in El Paso. She just moved from Oregon to El Paso.
Okay.
Loves it there.
Yeah, right down on the border. Yep.
Yeah. Pretty close. Yeah, so it's gonna be a good show. It'll be fun.
Good.
Just just enjoy the conversation, it's just us getting to know each other, and a few friends listening in.
Yeah, I've done quite a few of these. Matter of fact, I just got videos back from 2 that I did just before the Christmas break, and just put those out on my social media stuff. And
Awesome.
And then on my website, each one of these that I do, when I get the links, I take them and I have a media spotlight. And so I post those on my media spotlight. So
good.
Getting a pretty good library on there for people to see.
Yeah, no, I love it. And once you get your book published and it's out,
it's already out.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Okay, that's good.
It's been out since September.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about that then.
Okay. And then I have a study guide that I just released in November to go with it. So.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that too then.
Okay.
That'll be perfect. And then I don't know where Matt is. We go live in about 2 minutes, so he should be here any second.
Okay.
Sometimes he gets really busy and he comes in like at the last second.
Yeah. Now, how do you pronounce your first name?
Fazia.
Fazia.
Yes.
Okay. What is the background on that?
I have a very different background than most people. My dad worked for the UN and UNICEF and all these different, international agencies. And we were actually in Afghanistan at the time that I was born. And I was born in the US Embassy Hospital. And,
Okay.
this is a long time ago before they had baby name books. And so
Mhm.
my dad was out of town and my uncle just showed up with like a list of 20 names and this was on him.
Oh, okay.
So my mom's like, I like that one.
Yeah. Mhm.
So hi, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Fozzie. Happy New Year. How you doing?
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too. I'd like you to meet Dr. Davis McAlister.
Hello.
Hi, how
Hello,
are you, sir?
Davis. I'm doing good. How you doing today?
Good.
Good. All right. Go ahead and do some mic checks. Fozzie, go ahead and count back from 5 for me.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, sounded good, loud and clear. And Davis, go ahead and do the same.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, hearing you well. You're just using the internal mic on your computer?
Yes.
All right, yeah, it sounds pretty good. We can hear you okay. Just know with that mic, it's just kind of like an open mic, picks up all the room noise. So if you move around or like talk with your hands at your desk or
Yeah.
shuffle
Well,
papers, those types of noises will come through, but otherwise we're good.
I found a remote room in our clinic to, there's not a lot of traffic by this room. So,
All right, excellent. Yeah, sounds good. All right, perfect. Then we are good to go. I did send the hello on the chat. Did that come through to you?
I think I got it. Yep,
Got it. All right.
I got it. Thank you.
Right. Yep. So we'll get started here. We've got about a minute and a half until we get going.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Can you send me information on how to send an embedded link from my website, from Voice America? I'm not sure I'm doing it correctly. I just need to know how to send the embedded, not the regular link, but the embedded link.
The embedded link. You're sending from the embedded link that's on the VA page to someone? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I'll make sure I got it.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. 30 seconds.
All right. Thank you. And I'm going to call you Dr. McAlister just because I think it gives credibility when you're on the radio. So
Okay.
I don't want you to be thrown off by that.
no, it's fine.
Okay.
I go by so many different things, at home, even my wife just calls me Doc. So,
Well, she can call you anything she wants.
yeah.
All right, here we go. Have a good show.
Thank you.
Welcome to Focus on Success with Fozzie Acosti. Our program is designed to help you with executive function challenges. Our guest experts offer perspective, experience, and ideas to improve different aspects of your life. Now, here is your host, Fozzie Acosti.
Hi, welcome. I'm Fozzie Acosti, and today we are talking with Dr. Davis McAlister. He has a 15-year combined teaching and coaching experience at high schools in the state of Texas and holds a principal administration certification. He served in the U.S. Army for 8 years prior to earning a Bachelor of Science degree from Mississippi State University. He was awarded a Master of Educational Leadership from Sul Ross State University and a Bachelor of Anatomy, Doctor of Chiropractic, and Master of Strength and Performance from Parker University. Dr. McAlister coaches powerlifting at both the high school and national level and is active in his local community by volunteering and supporting high schools in the North Texas. He's also the sports chiropractor and certified strength and conditioning coach for a sports and performance clinic in Frisco, Texas. It's a pretty impressive resume you've got there, Dr. McAlister. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on. You sound like you never sleep.
No, I don't. So I might as well fill it with something. So,
I had a dog trainer one time who had a master's in, I don't remember what, I think he had an MBA actually. And I asked him, I said, you're a dog trainer. Do you need an MBA to train dogs? And he's like, the time goes by regardless. He goes, I might as well just do something with it. That's why he just kept going to school. Yeah, I love it. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
So, kind of going back, sometimes when you tell, all right, we're going to go back to my childhood a little bit, everybody goes, oh, not that far back.
Well, I don't think you're that old, so take us back. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about who you are. How did you become who you are? Is really what's important.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I was a latchkey kid. For people that, don't know what that is. I mean, we grew up in a generation where, both parents typically worked, and, they would work long hours, and you were kind of left to kind of fend for yourself. And, you had to develop your own sense of resilience and resourcefulness and independence. But along with that, people that grew up in that generation, it seems to cause a lot of conflicts and problems in the family dynamics, especially later on. Growing up, I had a pretty good relationship with my mother. Off and on with my dad. I mean, I would say I had a stable relationship with my dad, but as I got into high school and, dealing with teenagers in general is difficult. I have 5 children myself, and
Wow.
we have one child left at home. Our oldest is 28, and they range all the way down to 16. So we still have one still left at home. But each child poses its own set of challenges, and I'm not going to say that I wasn't without challenges, but in the process of developing that independence, it tended to cause conflict between myself and my dad, and it finally came to a head to the extent where my dad just said, "I'm done, get out," and I ended up on the streets for a few months, and then from there I managed to get in touch with an Army recruiter and was able to sign a contract, and within 10 days I was on a plane headed to basic training. So that was kind of my escape out of that situation. In the meantime, I was having to kind of fend for myself. I was sleeping wherever I could and eating whatever I could find, and managed to scrounge up and during that process. And then when the Army came along and said, "Hey, we'll give you a place to stay, feed you, give you clothes, pay you, we'll just do what we need you to do," and that sounded like a much better deal than that at the time. So
Yeah, it sounds like a fantastic deal. Even if you didn't have a difficult time, a lot of people still choose that route. So it's a good
Yep.
route.
Yep. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I spent I spent 8 years in the military. My primary job, I worked in military intelligence. I was a human intelligence specialist, is what it's known as now. At the time, we had a separate designation. I was an interrogator and cross-trained in counterintelligence. And then I also had to learn languages along with that. That was part of my job component. So by the time I got out of the service, I had working knowledge of Korean, Mandarin Chinese, Russian, and German. And then people always want me to start speaking in those. I'm like, that was a long time ago. Had no reason to use most of those. So, so my working knowledge of those is pretty much gone. But, I can still listen to a TV program and I'll hear something and I was like, oh, I remember that. And
You have that recognition still. It's not
Yeah.
like riding a bike, is it?
no, it's not. It's one of those things. If you don't continue to use it, it's, it's a very perishable skill. So, but during that process, I spent a lot of time working on, trying to figure out who I was, obviously, given the circumstances that I went in under, and given the relationship that I had at home, and the, there's some volatility there. There was a lot of self-discovery that had to take place, and figuring out who I was, building my self-confidence and self-esteem, and trying to really find my way and figure out what am I here for, and what's my purpose, and what am I supposed to do? Which, when you're kind of off on your own at that young of an age, that's a big question to have to figure out an answer for yourself.
Well, absolutely. And I know people who ask that same question of themselves, when they're in their, when their life is going really well. I mean, that's a very good question to ask yourself. What is my purpose and why am I here?
No. And it was one of those things. The biggest thing I think for me starting off with is the self-discipline that I had to develop. and then building my self-confidence through, figuring out what is it that I'm truly capable of? What are my limitations? Where are my boundaries as far as what I can and can't do, as far as my capabilities are concerned? And, had some great success in the military. Matter of fact, when I went through my primary leadership and development course to get promoted to non-commissioned officer or sergeant, I finished first in my class out of 223 candidates. So,
Wow.
but that was kind of a proof to myself that, I'm capable of a lot more than I ever thought I would be.
Yeah.
And it really changed my perspective, changed my, approach to things and my attitude, just to life in general, and kind of sent me on a course to, live a life of living up to my optimum potential.
No, I love that. I love that, you recognize at each level, it's like, well, if I can do this, I can do something else. And it just continuously builds your confidence. And it's clear by your resume that, you took those steps every time you had a level of confidence, you were able to take it to the next level.
Yes.
So
Yep.
that's impressive. Not everyone does that. So that's an impressive skill to have.
Yeah. That's one of the things too, that just as an observation of people in general, and even being a veteran and dealing with other veterans. And, in the clinic that I work in, we work with a lot of veterans, and I'm affiliated with several veterans organizations. You meet people that they hit a certain period in their life, and it seems like they get stuck.
Mhm.
And it's either due to some sort of traumatic event that happened, or maybe that was the last time that they found success in their life, and everything kind of went downhill from there, that nothing was ever done to rectify that course. And they seem to be stuck. And I recognize that, especially getting around, some of the veteran community, and a lot of them, that was kind of like the highlight of their life, and that's where they stayed. And even when I interact with other veterans, I try to encourage them, look, that's just a period of your life. That's not your entire life. And
Right. It's one highlight. It's not
one
the only highlight. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never wanted to be stuck. I've always wanted to continue to, I just have that personality that I'm always looking for that next level. I'm looking for that, that next step that I can take. And so I did not want that to be what defined me. I just wanted it to be a part of what helped, in my development to get to the next level that I was trying to get to.
Right. Yeah. You were much more than just that one time in your life. You were much more than just the military personnel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that you could see yourself as much more than that. I do think people get stuck, and I think it has a lot to do with their, ability to see that transition to something else. They just can't see the transition. I wish the military did a better job of helping people transition.
Yeah, I do too. And I think there's certain things that are.
And we weren't going to talk about politics.
No. Well, I mean, to me, this is not.
No, I love that.
Yeah. But to me, this is not necessarily politics, but it's, our veterans are a vital part of our community, and
Absolutely.
And I think that they need to be well taken care of. I think they need to, they have given their what people don't understand is that when you sign on that dotted line to serve your country, you're also giving up all your rights that are given to you, and all those things to go and serve. And there needs to be a reward for that on the other end.
I agree 100%.
And so,
and I think a lot of people would agree with that. I don't think it's just us. I think most of us agree that there should be some changes in the way veterans are treated.
Yeah. And granted, not every veteran has the same experience. Not every veteran's a combat veteran. Not every veteran has gone to war. But we need to make sure that whatever aspect that they are, whatever it is that they need on the other end of that service, that that it's there for them to be able to prepare them to be able to step back out, integrate back out into the world and society, and be able to fully function.
I agree completely. Yeah, you are absolutely correct on that. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons or some of the things that you've learned in your lifetime and some of the things maybe you needed to unlearn.
Mhm.
Are there things that you needed to unlearn?
There were a lot of things that I had to unlearn. You know, a lot of it was my approach to things as far as dealing with people. You know, I grew up in a household that, you know, I got yelled at a lot, and not that I have a problem with somebody, you know, being yelled at, but if that's the only way that you're spoken to for long periods of time, you know, you resort back to what you know,
Right.
good, bad, or otherwise. And I was very fortunate. My first squad leader when I went in the military had a very different approach with us. I noticed that all the other leaders that were in the unit, they constantly yelled at their guys all the time, and he never took that approach to us. And one day I just finally asked him, said, "Why? You know, why don't you treat us the way the other NCOs do? They're soldiers." And he told me, he said, "You know, my first squad leader taught me this, and I've carried it on." He said, "I'm going to pass it on to you." He said, "If all I ever do is yell at you, when I really need you to hear something important, you're not going to hear me because it's going
Right.
to sound like everything else that I say. So if there's
Exactly.
never a change and if there's never a difference, you're never going to hear it."
Mhm.
And that's something that I have taken with me, you know, throughout my military career when I had the opportunity to be able to lead soldiers. And you know, as a coach, I've always treated my athletes that way. When I've had other leadership opportunities, I've trained interns going through their clinicals. You know, I've approached them the same way. Um, you know, you don't always, not everything has to be the hard approach.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you know he definitely understood that when he did raise his voice, you paid attention.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like I used the opposite when I was working with my kids. I would lower my voice,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, mom must be upset about something. We should listen."
With my kids, most of the time they just got the look, and
Yeah.
usually that's sufficient enough to know. Most of the time I didn't even have to say anything. So,
Yeah.
but you know, it was funny even when I was coaching, you know, coaching football, high school football. Uh, you know, during a game, my players would know I would always rotate my players out to try to keep fresh players out on the field. And you know, I coached defensive line, and as they came off the sideline, they always knew whether they were in trouble or not. Because if I'm just staring at them and not saying anything, they already know that they screwed up, and they would just kind of go off on the sideline and finally circle back around behind me. Versus ones that I was just doing a rotation, you know, they come off and say, "Good job," you know, and they knew they weren't in trouble. So, but
Wow.
even with the ones that were in trouble, you know, the way I addressed them is when they finally circle back around behind me. You know, I didn't turn around and dress them down in front of the entire team on the sideline. I would get right here next to their ear hole in the helmet and, you know, talk to them, make sure they understood what it was they did wrong and what they need to do to correct it, and then move on from there.
Yeah, but that's coaching. That's not necessarily, you know, being angry. That's just correcting something so that their performance is better,
Yeah, exactly.
which is a huge difference than just yelling at somebody just for the sake of yelling.
Yeah,
Sometimes I think when people yell a lot, they really it's their lack of ability to communicate better.
exactly. And it all goes back to, you know, components of leadership. You know, that's one of the things that I have been an avid student of and studying of for the better part of, you know, 30 years now, really studying leadership and what is truly effective leadership versus what is management versus what is dysfunctional management.
Well, you're right. There's a huge difference between that.
Yeah.
Huge difference. Absolutely. Let's talk about some of your greatest successes. You've had so many, but let's talk about what you consider your greatest success.
I would say my greatest success is, you know, the people that I've been able to impact along the way. I have, you know, it's funny. I go back and if people look at my, you know, Facebook page, I have, you know, quite a number of people on there, but almost every single one of those people that are on there are people that I know personally and that I have had some sort of you know, impact or you know, connection with. And the vast majority of them have been my former students or my former players or former interns that I've worked with or colleagues that I have worked with. And have said that I've, made an impact on them. And to me, that's the greatest, that's the highest level of success, is that that you've been able to successfully impact other people. It's
Yeah.
not about what's hanging on your wall. It's not about a medal on your chest. It's not about another award on the shelf. It's about what have you left behind? What is the legacy that you're leaving for the next generation to come up?
Right.
Well,
That's the true mark of a leader. I mean, truly, what your legacy is really important.
Yeah. One of the books that I read early on was by John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And one of the laws that's in there that always really stuck with me was the law of multiplication. And so I can only influence a certain number of people. Working in a clinic, I can only treat a certain number of people over the course of my life. But if I can take 10 interns, teach them the way I do things, have an impact, show them how to be successful, show them how to take good care of their patients, or working with an athlete, teaching them proper technique and all those things, and then they go out and they train 10 more people. Well, I've already impacted, close to 1,000 people at that point without, having direct contact. That to me, that's the mark of success. Is what are the ripples that you have created that have managed to, to have a positive influence, a positive impact.
Yeah, that exponential growth is amazing. Truly amazing. Yeah. Wow. Okay. What are some of your greatest failures in life? And what I mean, I sense that you're much like me and that you learned from your failures, your mistakes. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from those mistakes?
I would say probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned from my mistakes is going back and looking at the things that I did that affected my home relationship, and making sure that when I started taking on a family, that one, I wasn't repeating the same mistakes that I was making, but also be able to help my children not make those same mistakes. As far as dealing with the relationship, learning how to communicate effectively.
Okay.
Those are the things that I felt like were my biggest challenges, especially on the communication side of things. I was naturally an introvert, growing up. I was pretty quiet, and even still, when I'm not doing these types of things, I'm a little bit more vocal and animated, and even still with this, if I'm up on stage, I'm actually a lot more.
Oh yeah, being on the radio is very different than being a speaker, isn't it?
Oh yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm much more animated when I'm up on a stage. But it was one of those. When I was in first grade, I was actually tested for retardation. The teachers thought that I was mentally retarded at the time. And
Wow.
because knowing what I know now, I suffered from extreme ADHD. I mean, I was hyperactive. I couldn't focus more than about 5 seconds on something, and then my mind was off on something else. And and trying to corral all that in to focus was like herding cats. It was
Very
and
challenging. Yeah.
yeah, but they didn't recognize ADHD wasn't even a thing back then.
Well,
There
a lot
was
of people even, refuted that it existed.
Yeah.
Like ADHD didn't exist for many years, according to so many people.
Yeah, and if you were one of those kind of restless kind of kids, you were just kind of written off as a bad kid that didn't have any discipline. And
Yeah.
and so when they had me tested, turns out that it was actually the opposite. They said I had a really high IQ and actually very intelligent, have the ability to be able to learn quite a bit. But my biggest challenge was learning how to focus.
Right.
And you have a lot, that lot of internal dialogue that you got to deal with, and sometimes your internal dialogue kind of puts you in a position where you're self-absorbed, even in other company, to where you're having conversations, but you're not having conversations with anybody else. It's,
Right.
you know, you're having conversations within your own inner dialogue. But and that's one of the things that I had to really learn how to change, especially, you know, when I got in the military, and then after that started finding myself in leadership roles, or at least roles where I was having an impact on people, and is learning how to better effectively communicate with people, and be able to communicate confidently. I would say probably one of the other biggest things is making sure that you own up to your own mistakes, not just to yourself, but, you know, if you mess up, own up that you messed up, you know, apologize, ask for forgiveness for it, forgive yourself for it, and then move on, and then forget about it, you know.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get stuck on the letting go part. You know, they might forgive themselves, they might forgive others, but they have a hard time letting it go.
Yeah.
So it's good that you do that. And it's good that you work with your family to recognize those issues and let those go as well, because that is truly, you know, how you move forward in life and keep those relationships strong.
Yeah.
Wonderful. How do you inspire others, like on a daily basis, or how do you inspire yourself?
To me, for me personally, it's my daily routine.
Okay.
You know, the first thing in the morning, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, and not branching off into, you know, religion, but I make sure that, you know, the first thing that my eyes lay on, you know, or laid on in the morning, before I read anything else, I read my verse of the day, and, you know, get my daily devotional with that done. And then right now I'm actually in the middle of powerlifting season. So I'm going, as soon as I do that, I get dressed and I have to go coach in the mornings. We start workouts at 5:30 in the morning. And so with my high school athletes, and then when I'm doing my drive from, you know, the school to my office, I have about a 45-minute, you know, drive that I have to make. You know, I have, you know, my daily motivational stuff that I like to listen to, audios and, you know, audiobooks. You know, I love listening to things that, you know, Steve Harvey and I have a very similar background as far as, you know, he was homeless at one time and had to find success on his own terms. And he was actually, you know, kind of defied the odds of, or the statistics of what should have happened to him. To find success in his own life. I love listening to Jim Rohn and Earl Nightingale, you know, a lot of those type of motivational type people. And matter of fact, in the last couple of weeks, I've started listening to a lot of Eric Thomas's material. So you find stuff that helps motivate you, get your mind going, get your energy up. And the reason that you have to do that, especially in the morning, is that your mind is most absorbent first thing in the morning.
Right.
And so it's extremely important what you put into it, including the music that you listen to. You know, all those things are extremely important, you know, for those times that your mind's most absorbent. So, you know, then as far as others are concerned, try to find people that are struggling with something, see what you can do to help. You know, I believe in living a life of service. I believe in what's called servant leadership. And, you know, if somebody, what can I do to help you? Help me help you. And, you know, whether I'm dealing with a patient, dealing with an athlete, you know, matter of fact, I had a young lady just this morning that she was beating herself up to tears because she didn't lift the weight that she was trying to get. And she's young, she's a little freshman, and just had to have that conversation, say, look, you've got to be patient. You're doing great, you know, and just continue to, you know, give them that influence and let them know, hey, you can do this. You know, just take a step back and take a deep breath.
Wonderful. You know, one of the things I want to tell our listeners is that you do have a book that you've written, and we're going to talk about it when we come back from the break. But if they wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that? I
have a website, it's drdavismcallister.com. And you can reach me through that website. My email is info@drdavismcallister.com as well. I have a Facebook page and an Instagram page that I post things along the way. And so people can reach out to me through any of those means. And what is the name of your book? If they wanted to get a copy. My book, the name of my book is The Pillars of Powerful Parenting. And then the subtitle is Guess What Your Teen Told Me Today. Okay. Yeah. I love it. Okay. So,
If you'd like to get a hold of Dr. Davis McAlister, you have his information. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, executivefunctioncoachaz.com. We have our January issue of Executive Function magazine coming out January 10th. So if you have not subscribed to that magazine, feel free to go to the website and subscribe so that you can get that issue January 10th. If you're looking to be on our radio show, or if you'd like to write an article for the magazine, Executive Function Magazine, you can also go to the website, and on the contact page, you can contact me and let me know what you're interested in doing. And I'd be happy to help you in any way that I can. If you're interested in our mind print assessment, you can also go to the website, or you can call me directly at 480-648-1122. And we can set up that mind print assessment. We are extending our sale till probably the end of January. So you can get the mind print assessment for $300. Normally we charge $350, and we do have ACT and SAT predictions in that mind print assessment. So this is a wonderful way to assess your child and see where they're at. And if you're looking to get in touch with me regarding executive function coaching, we are accepting new students for our spring semester. So you can give me a call and we can do a free consultation to see if you or your child are a good match for our coaching practices. Once again, that's executivefunctioncoachaz.com. And I want to extend just a quick thank you for all our listeners. Without you, this would not be possible. And I just want to thank our listeners in China and Russia and Europe and Australia, New Zealand. Without you, we really would not be here. So thank you very much. And we'll be back after these messages with Dr. Davis McAlister.
All right, good segment. We're all clear.
Thank you, Matt.
Mhm.
All right. So we have gone through most of your questions. So what I'd like to do when we come back is talk about your book.
Okay.
And we have about 30 minutes to talk about your book. So what are some questions that you feel I could ask you about your book?
I mean, things like what prompted me to write it. What is the, we talked about the basic premise. What are some key highlights that, we could discuss, maybe one or two general topics that we could talk about out of the book.
How do you feel about giving like examples, case studies, anything like that? Do you have case studies you could talk about? Okay.
I could, yep.
Okay. I'd like to throw those in at the end because then you can elaborate on those a little bit.
Okay.
I like working with smart people. It's so much easier to get things done. All right. Okay, so we'll talk about what inspired you to write the book. We'll talk about some highlights, but first we'll talk about what we'll talk about what the book is about.
Mm-hmm. If there's any, if you want to throw it out, any future projects that I have coming up, because I do have some things I'm working on.
Love it.
And then I do also offer parent teen coaching, using the book and the study guide to help work with, family dynamics.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that'll be a wonderful second segment.
Good.
All right, coming back in about 30 seconds.
You're doing okay so far? Is this okay?
Yep.
And after the show is over, if you could just stay on for just a couple minutes afterwards, I just want to tell you how everything goes after the show.
Okay.
And then I'll let you go.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, coming back.
All right, thanks, Matt.
You are listening to Focus on Success. To reach Fazia Costi or her guest on the live show, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to Fazia at executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Now, back to Focus on Success.
Welcome back. This is Fazia Costi, and today we are talking with Dr. Davis McAlister. So welcome back, Dr. McAlister.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here today. This has been a very wonderful show. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
I want to start talking a little bit about your book that you've written. So I want to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your book. What is the name of your book?
It's The Pillars of Powerful Parenting. Guess what your teen told me today? And so it's, I actually had a friend of mine come up with the title, because my original title was just, What Your Child Told Me Today. And had a friend of mine that's, published several books and things along those lines. And he's like, we got to come up with a better title. He said, this book is good enough that, it needs a much more, impactful title. So he's
I love it.
Of that. So
Well, he did you a good favor. So that's nice.
Good.
That's very nice. What inspired you to write this book?
So during the number of years, kind of going back just a little bit, right after I got out of chiropractic school, I went into full-time practice. And then in the area that we lived in, we got hit, our area got hit really hard economically during that 2006 to 2008 economic crunch.
Right.
Everybody in our area was losing jobs and, losing their health benefits, and it impacted our business as well. And we ended up having to scale back and look at other opportunities to be able to continue to move forward. And my wife also started having some health issues at the time.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So it was going to require me to be able to have a little bit more time, with my kids and being able to help her. So we kind of flipped it. I got offered a job to take over as a director for a health science technology program for a high school. And so I took that position, still practiced part-time, so I changed my practice dynamic to where I was still practicing part-time. And then out of that, I was also given an opportunity to coach. And one of the interesting things is when we started flipping that, for a short period of time, I found myself at home full-time with my kids as we were making our transition. And I had a real stark slap of reality, is that I didn't know anything about my kids. I didn't know what they liked. I didn't know what their favorite foods were. I didn't know what their tendencies were. I didn't know that all 5 of them had different personalities. But it was because I was repeating, I was committing what I call a generational curse. I was doing the same thing that I was raised with. I was working from, hours on end. I was working weekends and spending all my time doing that. And essentially I was neglecting my family and, trying to get a business off the ground and trying to find success under those terms. And I wasn't seeing the forest for the trees. And it really forced me to change my perception and concept of what success really is and what's really most important. And I don't believe that we're giving children to ignore and to raise themselves. We're giving children to be able to mentor and guide and to be able to put out into the world so that they can continue to be able to have an impact, a positive impact on the world we live in. And by me going into education, that allowed me to be able to spend a lot more time with them. I have gotten the opportunity to be able to coach every one of our kids through high school. And in that process, I always tried to mentor kids and help kids along the way. And, always shared my background because I, walking through those halls, I know that there were kids that were having some of the same struggles that I had when I was in high school. And not that I went out looking for them, but I believe that you're going to attract to you what you are.
And you're also going to recognize it.
Yeah, and you're going to recognize it. And so I had a lot of kids that would seek me out for advice and having struggles, whether it be at home or personally or those types of things. And I always took the approach to that of, okay, if this is my kid talking to me, or if this is my child talking to somebody else, what would I want my child told? And so I always gave advice from that aspect and from that standpoint. So I really gave more advice more as a parent than I did, as a teacher or a coach or
Right.
whatever. And tried to be that voice for parents that, because you never know who or what is influencing your kids out of eyesight and earshot. And
Yeah.
I always wanted parents to be able to have that confidence that their kids were going to get good sound advice if they did come to me for anything. And I actually had parents that would come to me for different things. So I started logging a lot of these conversations and stories, and it kind of developed, started taking on the shape of a storyline. So for about 2 years, I continued to write a lot of these things down and kind of develop, try to pick out what the key points were. What were the key problems? What were the issues that were going on? What's the commonality between all of these different conversations and these different issues that I kept seeing with kids and their home lives and families? And I wanted to use it to be able to make sure that I was filling in the gaps where my kids were concerned. I tried to use it to help me be a better parent. I would take these conversations back, and I would go back, and my wife and I would talk about them, and allowed us to be able to take a step back and analyze what we were doing, how we were doing it, what were the mistakes that we were making that we need to rectify and correct and get things back on the correct course, and at least for us and our family dynamics. And as it started to kind of taking the shape, and then I got kind of a clear message to stop, the logging of that, because it was already kind of taking the shape of a book. And about a little over a year ago, got a very clear message that I needed to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that time, so we're looking at a 8 to 9 year gap. And so we're at actually about year 10 now of that gap of time from the time that I started writing all this down to the time that I actually finished it and published the book. And it allowed my wife and I to be able to take the time to look at all these different things. What were the solutions that we were coming up with, and actually put them into practice where our kids were concerned, to make sure that, I'm not repeating the same generational curse and having, the end result of the type of relationship that I ended up having with my family. And it's one of those things too that Eric Thomas talks about. Don't allow the things that you suffered from to dictate, to push on to your kids. But to a certain degree, you also have to allow the mistakes that were made to not be repeated as well. So you don't necessarily have to live for not making mistakes, but you do need to live for doing things better so that history is not repeated.
Well, I kind of see it as a difference between active parenting and passive parenting.
Yeah.
Passive is the traditional, just kind of make sure your kids have food on the table and a roof over their head and they go to school. Mm-hmm. That's kind of enough. That's I think what most people consider I've done my job.
Yeah.
And you were you switched the gears a little bit and became an active parent, which is, kind of traditionally the difference between, a parent who's a father versus a mother. Mothers are more active, whereas fathers tend to be more passive, where you decided to actively decide to be an active parent.
Yes. And it's interesting, my wife and I both are type A personality type people. And so, having two active parents that are involved in, and, when your kids are growing up, they don't necessarily always appreciate it, but when they start seeing what's going on with some of the other kids at school and some of the things that those kids are dealing with in their home lives, and the fact that, they come to games and they have a senior night, and we have a senior that doesn't have a parent to walk them across the field. And I've had to walk more than one, senior across the field over the years on senior night because there was no parent that showed up, that weren't involved. And so my kids, as they've gotten older, they've, developed a much greater appreciation for the level of involvement that we had with everything that they were doing. And not to the extent that we were trying to be helicopter parents, but it was with the intent of making sure that we laid a good foundation for the relationship, so that, I believe that every good parent is working their way out of a job. And,
Yes.
you want your children to be independent, and, and you want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, and be able to take
Definitely.
life on and handle things in their own terms. And while your children, as they get older, there's that transition period of, as they're coming out of high school and becoming a young adult and trying to figure out life. And you can't teach them everything that they're going to, be challenged with as they leave the house. All you can do is try to give them the tools to be able to step back and be able to use to take and handle problems on their own, if that's what's required. So
Right. And if you've done your job well, and it sounds like you have, and you're an active parent, then your children should have enough skills to be able to problem solve and get to where they need to be. Or if they don't have enough self-confidence to come to you and say, I need a little help.
yeah, and thus far we've been successful with that.
Yeah.
We've got a good working relationship with our children, and we have regular communication with them, and they we've got one he's actually finishing up fire school. He's married and lives
Wow.
hours away from us. He's finishing up fire school, and then we have a set of twins that they're 19. Daughter's trying to get her prerequisites done for nursing school, and then her twin brother is in the Navy, and he's stationed over in Japan. So
Wow.
very different dynamics of when you get called for advice, you got to be prepared for just about anything.
Yeah. That's
But
awesome.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I love how active you and your wife are as parents. I wish everyone was an active parent. I work with kids and adults, and a lot of times, most of the parents that I work with are very active parents, because they wouldn't be coming to me otherwise. But sometimes I get a parent who, comes to me and then they become absent once their child starts working with me. It's like they're like handing it over, basically.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's not really parenting. That's
No, they're turning you into a babysitter, basically. Is what's happening.
Yeah. Or at least they'd like to. Yeah. That's not always the right way to parent. But I love that you're being conscientious, and your mindset is, you have this long-term goal in mind, and you sound like you really are looking at your family as long-term, and you should be, because they're there for life. Not everyone looks at their family that way. And
No.
I have found that is a very, well, at least for me, it's a very foreign topic. It's something that doesn't resonate with me. I think your family's there forever, so you have to really take care of them. And it sounds like you really are. I love the book. I love what you do. Talk a little bit about your study guide and your parent and teen coaching that you do with your families that you work with.
So decided to write a study guide to accompany the book, and that way I had an opportunity to be able to, when I had the opportunity to be able to sit down with a parent, or hopefully a parent and a teen, and be able to help them, kind of sit back and step back and look at the relationship. My goal is not to tell a parent how to parent. My goal is to give a framework to, kind of guide your family with. And if you look at the things that I put in there, we call them pillars. Pillars are foundational. They're the main support, for the roof of a structure or a building. And if you look at even some of the ancient ruins that are still standing, when the roofs have collapsed and gone, what's still left? You still have the pillars that are still standing.
Right. What are your pillars for your book? What do you mind sharing those?
I can share a few. I've got so the very first one is unconditional love. And that was something, it took me a long time to really understand what that meant, as far as what unconditional love is, and how does that apply to your family? What are the restrictions? And one of the events that happened in my life is I got to kind of, over the years, I tried to mend my relationship with my parents, and it had been off and on and off and on. And unfortunately, we've been in a very long extended period of off, and it was more by their choice than mine. It was an issue when my wife and I met, she had two boys that were actually from her previous marriage. But when we talk, step is not used in our house. Those are my sons. These are my children, and they've always been treated as such. And unfortunately, we had an issue where, my side of the family wanted to treat the two older boys differently than the kids that were biologically, mine. And we had to make a decision, and basically had to give an ultimatum and say, look, this is not how we're going to work this. And, you need to make a choice of your level of involvement. And they chose not to be involved. So, and that was their choice to make, as much as it, I hated it.
Yeah,
But,
I'm sorry to hear that. That's unfortunate.
And during some of those course of events, I got an email that was sent to me by some of my family that basically told me that, you've exceeded your number of transgressions. And I was
Sorry.
like, yeah. And I was like, my first thought was, there's that little snarky side of me that, as people get to know me, I've, got a pretty sharp sense of humor, but, that snarky side of me was like, well, if I'd known that I had a limit on number of transgressions, I would have used them much better than what I did. So, but, but it was also, I was like, I didn't know there was a limit, since when was there a limit on how many times you could screw up where your parents are concerned, and then that was it. They don't have anything to do with you anymore. They disown you. And
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm really sorry. Yeah.
And it's one of those things. It is what it is. That's my reality. I don't let it define my life.
Well, clearly you've moved on. You obviously have a fantastic life, but yeah, this is not a bright point in your
No,
life.
it's not.
Story.
I mean, here's the thing that I hope people understand is this. One of my favorite people I like to listen to is Zig Ziglar, and I know that he's dead and gone, and he's passed on. But a lot of his stuff that he taught over the years was still out there, and it's still very profound, and still has an impact. But I actually got to hear him live, and one of the things that before he passed away, and one of the things that he said is that when you meet great people, the first thing that you need to understand is that the only reason that they have greatness is because they had to overcome great obstacles to get there. And so,
True.
And while I don't see myself as having that level of greatness yet, it helped me understand that, okay, they helped me understand what life was more about. Life is about dealing with problems. You're always, right. And I've heard a lot of people say this in different ways, but life is all about problems and growing from those problems. You're always either going into a problem, in the middle of a problem, or coming out of a problem. And
so we better get good at transitions.
Yes. And most of the time you're in all three phases at the same time,
hilarious.
With different things. And if you ever find yourself in one of those situations where, I don't understand why this keeps happening to me, the answer is real simple. It's because you haven't learned the lesson that you were supposed to learn the first time it happened to you.
Absolutely.
And so it's going to continue to repeat itself until you finally learn that lesson. It's what I call going around the block. You're going to keep going around that block until you finally learn your lesson. Then you get to move on to the next block. Well, you're spending your life building blocks, and that building of blocks is a foundation for who you are and building up. And then eventually these couple problems that you had to find solutions for and you finally learn lessons from are going to help you address this one. And then eventually you start building an entire wall. And this is what I refer to as the temple within us. This is our temple, is the lessons that we've learned and the things that we've had to accomplish and overcome so that we can continue to grow.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. From your book, is there any specific advice that you would share, that you want to share with our listeners? Is there something out of your book that you feel is the most important lesson in life, or the most important thing that you've learned that you'd like to share?
If I could chalk it up to one thing, there's 10 pillars that I put in the book And they range from, the first thing that we talked about was unconditional love. Then, we talk about communication. We talk about being consistent. We talk about, goal setting. We talk about, having an action plan. And it really, if you look at all those things, those are the same principles that you would use, that you would hear at a business success,
Right.
lecture or seminar, or, kind of a motivational type deal. It's the same principles. It's just you're applying them to your family, but most people don't ever look at it that way. They don't look at treating their family the same way, with the same type of goal setting as they would their own business. And
You're right. Not every family has goals.
No. And
you're right. Yeah.
and
Fascinating.
and so with that, though, with the goal, you have to have the end product in mind. What is the end result? And so when you look at your kids, you're always going to have to deal with something right now, but you deal with something right now with, what do you want that end product to look like? What does that child look like on the end? And that's how you parent them. That's how you raise them. That's the lessons that you teach them with that end goal in mind. What does that look like when they step outside of my house as an adult?
Well, I really appreciate this. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. And I'm going to ask you one last question.
Okay.
Based on you have clearly done wonderful things with your life, but if you were going to look back, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Shut up and listen.
So basically what you're telling me, what I'm hearing is you had a very strong personality when you were young.
and I had a hard time. I had a hard time being told I was wrong. I had a hard time taking criticism. I wanted to be in charge, even though I had no clue what I was trying to be in charge of. And I had to learn to be a better follower before I could be a better leader. And
Yes.
and so if I could get my 20-year-old self to understand that, I probably would be a lot further along in life than where I am now.
Interesting. Okay. One last time, if you don't mind sharing how people can get in touch with you, and if they want a copy of your book, where they can get that.
So you can go on my website, drdavismcalister.com. My email is info@drdavismcalister.com. There's also links on there to my social media pages, and I have a section on there for media highlights. So if you want to see some of the other interviews and other people that I've talked to along the way, there's also a link on there to my book. But you can go to Amazon, both the study guide and my book, or on Amazon. You just search up either Dr. Davis McAlister, Pillars of Powerful Parenting, and both of those should pop up. But I have the links on my website as well. And then I'm also, I'm always interested in speaking engagements and being able to get in front of more people. Right now, most of my coaching sessions that I'm doing with parents or other people that are just having me work with them on basic success principles. It's been just a kind of a online Zoom type format, but I really want to get to the point where I'm going and spending a day, working with a group of people and taking them through those steps and having some more personal interaction. I know we're coming out of the days of COVID where everything, and it's also a convenience to be able to do things, and I like this format, especially with my time schedule, but I still want to have those opportunities to be able to get out and get in front of people. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank
If you're looking to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Make sure you subscribe to our magazine, Executive Function Magazine. Our next issue goes out January 10th. So make sure you've subscribed so you can get a copy of that. We are now a monthly publication. So if you're looking to publish, you can also send us a copy of an article you'd like to publish, or you can send a request and we'd be happy to talk to you about what we're looking for. If you're interested in being on the show, feel free to email me at fazia@executivefunctioncoachaz.com. And I'd be happy to chat with you about that as well. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Without you, this would not be possible. And we will see you next time.
Okay, perfect. Good job. We're all clear.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. Have a great day and Happy New Year.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And Fozzie, I just want to double check, make sure the number I have for you is still right. I'm going to give you a call a little later about the embed. Is it the 480? Is it still the 480 number?
Yeah. Give me 1 second, Matt. Let me look at my calendar because I've got a pretty full schedule today. Yeah, I've got the next couple of hours free, and then I've got some time around 2:00 free. So if you want to call after between 2 and 4, and after the show, I'll be free probably in about 15 minutes.
Okay, I got a show I'm going to start, and then once it gets going, I'll give you a call here in about maybe
Okay.
half hour.
Thanks.
Okay,
Sounds
perfect.
good.
Thanks. All right,
Bye, Matt.